They thought they were punishing me by setting fire to my old corn barn, but when the ashes cleared, they realized they hadn't just crossed a neighbor, they had declared war on a federal judge feared in every courtroom across the state. If you want more shocking real-life stories twisted with justice, make sure you stick around, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more jaw-dropping tales. It started with the simple fact that I wanted peace, a place where I could sit on my porch after long days of sentencing criminals, of hearing liars squirm, of weighing justice against mercy, a place where the smell of my corn harvest reminded me that beneath the black robes I was still a man of the land, and yet the law didn't see it that way, especially one woman who had declared herself queen of the neighborhood, the one everyone whispered about behind her back but no one dared confront face to face. Karen. The type of person who lived to file complaints about mailbox paint colors, who measured grass with a ruler, who believed a misplaced trash can was an assault on civilization itself, and when she saw my weathered red barn full of drying corn cobs, she called it an eyesore, a fire hazard, and most insultingly, agricultural clutter, and from that moment she became obsessed with tearing me down, only she didn't know who I was, because when I moved here I deliberately kept my profession quiet. I let them think I was just some older man with a quiet demeanor and a stubborn streak, but Karen pushed. She pushed hard, starting with fines in the mail, notices taped to my door, threats of legal action from the HOA board she controlled, and every time I ignored them she grew more red-faced, her shrill voice echoing across cul-de-sacs during HOA meetings where she demanded I be dealt with, yet I held my silence. I let her dig her grave, because in my courtroom I had sent mob bosses away for life, dismantled fraud empires, and ordered corrupt officials to prison, and if there was one thing I understood it was that people like her always escalate until they make a fatal mistake, and her mistake came one cool autumn night when the harvest moon glowed pale over the fields and I smelled the acrid stench of smoke carried on the wind, saw the orange flickers licking the horizon, and when I ran out the back door my barn was already engulfed, the dry husks snapping like gunfire, the flames towering into the night sky, and in the shadows just beyond the light I saw her, Karen, with her arms crossed, watching with a smirk as if she had finally won, but she didn't know the cameras hidden in the hedges had caught everything, didn't know I had long since prepared for her antics, and she certainly didn't know that in a matter of hours her smug little empire would crumble. I called the fire department but the barn was gone before the hoses could even sputter, and as neighbors gathered, some pretending to be concerned, I heard whispers, speculation, but none dared accuse her out loud, though everyone knew, because Karen had been ranting about that barn for months, and when she tried to feign sympathy with crocodile tears, I almost laughed, because the mask was cracking, and when the police arrived and began their preliminary investigation, she grew bold again, claiming I must have been negligent, that my old junk finally went up on its own, but I simply shook my head, gave the officers my security footage, and watched the color drain from her face when they pulled her aside for questioning, yet I wasn't finished, not by a long shot, because the HOA was complicit too, having empowered her, having signed letters threatening demolition, and I had enough legal firepower to make every one of them wish they had stayed far away from my land, but instead of storming in with lawsuits, I played the long game, the same way I'd broken criminal syndicates, wait for them to underestimate me, let them think they could win, then strike so hard they never recover. The next week was chaos. Karen's home was searched, accelerant residue found on her gloves, her laptop revealed emails bragging about taking care of the barn problem, and when she was arrested in front of the whole neighborhood she screamed that it was all a setup, that I was manipulating the system, and she wasn't entirely wrong, because yes, I knew exactly which detectives would be assigned, I knew which federal statutes would override the weak HOA bylaws, and I knew that arson on agricultural property carried sentences much harsher than she could imagine, but the real shock came later, when the press learned my identity, when reporters shouted into microphones, federal judge's barn burned down by HOA president. And suddenly the HOA board that once hid behind her was scrambling, resigning, fleeing from cameras, trying to save face, while Karen sat in a cell with no idea that her trial would be presided over by one of my colleagues, judges who owed me favors, judges who knew the weight of my word, and I didn't even need to speak to ensure she got the maximum. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Karen wasn't just petty, she was dangerous, because during the investigation it came out that she had connections with a local developer who wanted to buy out farmland and replace it with high-end townhouses, and my barn stood as an obstacle to rezoning, so she wasn't just acting on her own rage. She had been promised money, influence, perhaps even a seat on the town council if she cleaned up the neighborhood, and when I dug deeper, I found the developer's fingerprints all over the HOA's recent push for stricter covenants, found campaign donations tied to shady LLCs, and suddenly this wasn't just about a burned barn, it was about corruption at a level that made my blood boil, because justice isn't just a job for me, it's my identity, my lifeblood, and if you attack my home you ignite something far worse than fire. You unleash my determination. So I took the evidence, built the case brick by brick, pulled in federal prosecutors I trusted, and within months the developer was indicted on conspiracy charges, fraud, and attempted bribery of public officials, and Karen, thinking she might cut a deal, tried to flip on them, but her arrogance destroyed her, because in her testimony she contradicted herself so many times that even her own attorney begged her to stop talking, and when sentencing day arrived she faced me, not in my courtroom, because I recused myself, but in my presence nonetheless, as I sat in the gallery while another judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts, 15 years without parole, and as she was led away in shackles she finally realized the truth. She hadn't burned a barn, she had lit a fuse under her own life. And the neighborhood, freed from her tyranny, the HOA collapsed, replaced by a voluntary association that cared more about community than control, and for the first time in years children played in the streets without her screeching about noise ordinances, porches had mismatched paint and no one cared, and every fall the scent of fresh corn filled the air again, because I rebuilt the barn, bigger and stronger, not out of revenge but as a reminder. Some fires destroy, but others forge steel, and in the ashes of Karen's cruelty I saw neighbors find courage, saw justice extend beyond the courtroom into everyday life, and though many still whisper about me, about the feared federal judge who lived among them in quiet disguise, I let them whisper, because sometimes fear is the only shield against tyranny, and I'll gladly be the shadow they fear if it means peace for those who deserve it. So when you ask me what happened that night, when you ask how a petty HOA dispute turned into federal convictions and a neighborhood's rebirth, I'll tell you this. Never underestimate the quiet neighbor, never assume the man tending his corn is just another retiree, and never, ever, light a fire unless you're prepared to be consumed by it yourself.